Hey everybody, and welcome to the channel. My name is David Larsen, and today I'm going to be running you through basically some things about how to customize your Dorico Pro. As far as I'm concerned, this program has a lot of features when it comes to getting exactly what you need out of the program, meaning you can set your own fonts, you can do your own keyboard shortcuts, you can use external devices like Stream Decks and all these other things that'll really help you get things working the way you want with a lot of efficiency. And I've been getting a lot of questions lately on some of these customizations. So today I'm going to be walking you through a few of these, including percussion notation and some other things like that. So here we go with some customizations in Dorico Pro. So here in this score I'm working on of Here Comes Santa Claus, I wanted to kind of use this as an example of some things that we can do. Now this applies to kind of any kind of score, so don't think that this is the one and only way of doing it. This is just literally one of those things where you can use any score to do it. And so I'm going to start with some percussion stuff. Now, for those of you who haven't taken the time to check it out, the first place you want to make sure you're really familiar with is the notation options for percussion notation, and then the layout options for notation. So let's go to the notation options for a second. Now, I set up my Stream Deck so I can just hit a button there to get to these different things, which is super duper handy. And so if we go down here in our notation options, you're going to see the notation options for percussion. Now, there's a couple of really important ones here that I like to point out. You have these overlapping notes in the same direction. Now, this one, I'm not 100% sure why you'd ever want to notate it this way. I mean, I'm a firm believer in giving people options, but it's super duper confusing. And so as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to doing percussion notation, we should always use this truncated version here. It helps avoid sort of the unnecessary, because you ask most percussionists, they don't really care if a note is a quarter note or a half note. They just care what beat it starts on, because when you hit the snare drum head, that's it, right? It doesn't ring out. There's no anything like that. Underneath it, you have this one that is really 50-50. You can have use the single voice thing, or you can have the kit editor to use both. I'm a big fan, especially when I'm doing drum set, of having stems up and stems down. And so for me personally, one of the things I like to do is leave it on this one here. But sometimes it's just nice to throw it on the single voice thing, because especially when you have a lot of crazy percussion instruments, this can really help out. So just a thing to think about. I like to get rid of the extra rests. You can see there. And so these settings here are really, really important. And one of the things I want to also point out is you can see that this is actually dependent by flow. So if you're doing a multi-movement work, you can actually change these settings per the flow. Now this only has one flow or one movement, so I don't have to worry about that. But it's nice to know that in movement 1, you could do a one way, and in movement 2, you could change it. So there you go. Those are the first things. And then the other part I like to show off is the layout options. Now, under the layout options, if you go to players, you will see percussion. And the thing that's important here is it gives us the option for our percussion parts. Now you can see it says drum set here, but that's the name of my percussion part. So if I had a percussion 1 or something like that, the name would change. But you have the access of choosing 5-line stave, grid, or single instrument. Now if you choose single instrument on a drum set part, that's crazy, right? Because it blows it up into every single instrument that you have available to you. But if we go back to those layout options, we can easily send it back over to the 5-line stave, which is the way most people want to read a drum set part. You can also do the grid view, which I'm really back and forth on grid view. I think when it works great. It's a hybrid between the two, where you have a single line that represents each instrument, but they're truncated. And so you can see it's much, much shorter, but it does connect the stems together and a few things like that, which to me makes it kind of complicated to read. Now, if you had like maybe 2 or 3 instruments, I think this could be really helpful, like for quad toms, for example. simple, but for regular notation, I think it's pretty confusing. So I'm going to go ahead and throw it back there. Now you can also see right under that, this is the other setting I like to show people, which is you have this show percussion legends on the grid and show percussion legends on 5-line staves. And all this means is this will tell us what instrument is playing at any given time in a percussion part, which can be super duper handy. So that's what those things are for. So now I want to dive into a question I had gotten from a viewer on the channel, which was how to make a custom kit for unpitched percussion instruments. And I've done this in a video like a long time ago, but I thought it would be cool to kind of take us through that again. So let's go ahead and we're going to go to our setup tab here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a new player. And in this case, we're going to add the instruments that we want in that unpitched percussion part. So I'm not actually going to add a kit or anything. I'm actually going to add just single instruments. And so let's say I wanted to add, let's see, unpitched percussion. And then let's say I wanted to have congas in there. And you can see in Dorico, it has this regular conga part. It has the different types of congas in terms of the playing techniques. And so if you're unfamiliar with these terms, these are the way that you'll hit the drum and it'll change the tone of the instrument. And so in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add the 4 different tones so that in my playback, I can get a better representation of what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and add those in. Okay, then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this conga part out of that group so that I have 4 different conga parts. Okay, so now you can see I have conga 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you can see there's the various different instruments. Now, what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to start by just having these be single instruments. Now, I could go back in and I could label these, because remember when I was choosing this instrument, I was giving it the correct conga part, right? I was calling it, this first one was the quinto. And so if I wanted to go ahead and do that, I could actually call that instrument or player that part. The other thing I could do is I could put them all in one player, but for the purposes of what I'm doing here, it I think is a little easier to start this way. So now that I have my conga parts, 1, 2, 3, and 4, what I'm going to do is I'm actually, you know what, I'm going to do this a little differently. Sorry for leading you down a dark path here. I'm going to delete those out, and I'm going to go back in here, and I'm going to add instruments to this part, because I think this is just going to be a little easier. So all I did is I just added in the different conga parts in one player. And the reason I'm doing this, and like I said, and I apologize for sort of doing it a little bit backwards, was we want to make a percussion kit out of it eventually. Okay, so there's my 4 different conga parts representing the 4 different sounds. Now you could do this with any 4 unpitched percussion. You could even do it with pitched percussion, but it's just a little harder because pitched percussion oftentimes needs its own like 5-line stave. Okay, so now that we have that, you can see that in my score, it's only showing 1 line. But if I go to the right mode here, and then I flip it over to the galley view, you can see there are my 4 different conga lines. And for right now, this is a great way of entering the notes so that I can actually see what's going on. So if I go down here, you can see that I can start entering in pitches. And then if I take that and I copy it down in here, and then in here, and then in here, we can go ahead and hit our playback, and we'll see that it'll actually make the different sounds of our conga. Oop. I wanted it to only play that part. All right, so you can see now what it has done is it has allowed me to enter in these notes. And the nice thing about this is when we go back to our page view here, you can see that it'll actually label which part it is. Now, again, if I went back to the Setup tab, I could label these by going in and changing edit the names here. And so I could call this Q. And so now, when I do that, you can see it will actually change these on the part so that when you are seeing the naming conventions, it actually will show up correctly. And you can see there's the conga T because I changed that name around. And that's over here in the Setup tab. Okay, so back here on the right, again, I've put in my conga part. Now what I want to do is instead of having 4 separate instruments that are played one at a time, I want to turn them into a percussion kit. Now, the reason that the kit is important is in Dorico, a percussion kit is really the idea that one person is going to play multiple instruments at the same time. So if I'm going to pick up and I'm going to play 5 different instruments all at once, then I needed to make a kit out of it. So to begin with, what I'm going to do here is I created a player, and then I added in my instruments. And again, when I go to the galley view, I can see those 4 different instruments, and I can enter in all the rhythms and everything. But then what I need to do is I need to create a kit so that when I'm in page view, it displays the way I want it to, aka it's not just a single line that changes instruments, it's actually like, say, a 5-line stave. So what I'm going to do is with this player highlighted, I'm going to right-click on the player, which is the big box that holds all of the instruments, and I'm going to create a kit. You can see we have combined instruments into kit, or we can create an empty kit. And in this case, because we already added the congas, which added the playback to the program so that I can hear them correctly, I'm going to go ahead and combine those together. Now you can see the next thing it's going to do is it's going to open up our kit editor. And in our kit editor, what it's showing us here in this first system here is a grouping of our 5 different lines. So the gray lines here represent the regular lines of our stave. So in treble clef, this would be a B, there's our D and F, and so on and so forth. And then the white line above and below, that's one ledger line above or below. Now what we want to do here is we want to assign these 4 different instruments into the spots where we can find them. And you can see that in this view I can actually see which one is which. And so this one is our highest sound, so I'm going to go ahead and put that one on the top. And then I have the tumba, which is the lowest, so I'm going to put that one in the bottom space. And then I'm going to put the other 2 like that. So now what's going to happen is in a 5-line stave view, anytime that we see this sound, it's going to be in that upper space of the line. This would be where a C would be in treble clef, A, and an F. We can also in this screen click on any one of these instruments and choose the stem direction. Now for me, what I'm kind of thinking in my brain is that these 2 higher sounds are together, if you will. Like I would play them as a grouping. So I'm going to go ahead and put them with stems up. And then on the bottom 2, I'm going to make them stem down. And the reason I'm doing the stem down is because I want them to be sort of combined into a different direction. So if I was doing my left hand with one of the top sounds and my right hand with one of the bottom sounds, I could differentiate them. Now I can choose here whether I want to use a slash voice or not, but in this case, I'm totally cool with what I have here. I can also, from this screen, go in and I can change the names of any of these instruments. I can assign playback techniques, and I can do different kinds of note heads, and I can also change the note head set. Now, for me, these ones in my mind should be just standard note heads because technically a conga is pitched right. And so that's how I'm going to leave that. But it is important to get the stem direction correct. Now, this thing here, this number 1, 2, that's a layer thing. And so sometimes people like to break these into different layers. And so they'll do kind of a multi-layer system if they had a really complicated kit. In this case, I don't really need that. So now, the other things I need to do here before I leave this is I need to go to my grid, and I need to make sure that this looks correct too. And you can see that this one is now below the other one. So I want to move it above because I want it to match the other screen in terms of high to low order. And I also want to get the stem directions the same. And so you can see that they carried over from the previous screen, which is exactly what you want. And then we have this gap feature here, which the gap is just how spaced apart they are, which is kind of a handy feature. And then finally, under the single line instruments, again, there's not a whole lot to do here other than I just want to put them in the same order as the previous screen. And so I'm going to make sure that I have the quinto on the top and the tumba on the bottom, and then I have my other ones here in the middle. And then lastly, I'm going to go ahead and change this percussion kit, and I'm going to call it conga, and then I'm just going to do CON for my short, and then I'm going to hit apply. Now you'll see there's this check mark up here for drum set. Now the reason for that check mark is some MIDI instruments would like to know that you're playing a drum set instead of random percussion parts. But in this case, I'm going to leave it alone because, again, it's not technically a drum set, right? So I'm going to hit close. And now you'll see that we're met with the different options for our layout. So if I go back to my layout options, I can go under my players and percussion, and then I can choose, do I want to have the 5-line stave, the grid, or the single line instrument? And you can see there is my part that I put in. So I'm going to go ahead and put that to the 5-line and hit apply. And now you can see they're displaying in the 4 different ways that I wanted them to look. And in this case, if I was to go back to the right menu, I can actually put in multiple different instruments. And so I could do this. So you can see that now that percussion kit I created functions just like a drum set part. And if I zoom in there for you, you can see that now I have my top 2 congas, and then I have my bottom congas, and they have the different stem directions. And so again, in my setup, I created one player, and again, I used my player add, and I added the first of my single instruments. In this case, I'm going to do bongo high. And then under that player of bongo, I'm going to go in and I'm going to add, again, unpitched percussion, bongo low, add. And then while it's highlighted, I'm going to combine instruments into a kit. And when the kit designer comes, I'm going to assign spaces or lines for the different instruments, high and low. And then I'm going to do stem directions. So low goes down, high goes up. And then in the grid, I'm just going to make sure everything jives the way I want them to. And then I'm going to rename this one to bongo. And so now again, when I go to the layout options, under the players and percussion, I have the option of what kind of stave I want. And then I have access to them just like they would be if it was a drum set part. And again, this is a really great way of customizing your score. And this is technically how you'd make like an orchestral percussion part that we've all done for orchestra or concert band pieces. And so that's how you would do that. You just pick the instruments you want and add them in. The nice thing is because of the flexibility of a kit, if I really wanted to have complete control, I could throw these over to single line. And although it's really, really cumbersome, what it allows me to do is it allows me to see all the different lines and parts, and I could quickly enter everything perfectly the way I want them, rhythmically, so I can see everything, and then the computer will crush it all together for me and condense it. And so again, it's a really handy feature. Now you can see that Dorico is doing some bracing and some stuff like that I could obviously turn off if I wanted to, but I have no intention of leaving it this way in my final version. So when I go back to my layout options and I put my conga and my bongo back, you can see that it went back to a more traditional bracing scheme. And so as you're doing this, like, don't be afraid of that part. So again, that is the quick steps to making this into your own parts, is going in and adding a player, adding the instruments, creating a kit, naming it, getting the stem directions correct, and then away you go. And you could create your own custom drum set by that same token by adding in the instruments you want so that you could trigger the sound sets that you want, and so that the computer will play back the way you're hoping it will. So again, these are just some really quick and easy ways of getting that done. Now, there was another couple of things that people have been asking me a lot about, and I really wanted to share. And these ones are kind of deep in the weeds, but I think they're important, which is things like bass guitar and piccolo, that they are technically transposing instruments. If you weren't technically aware, a bass guitar sounds an octave lower than it's written. And so what that means is if you were to go to your piano, the lowest E on the piano would be the open E string. And if you had a 5 or 6 string bass, the low B string would be the lowest B possible on a piano keyboard. But the way it's written, it actually looks like it's higher. Now, the reason that this matters is back when I used to use Finale would use the clef to dictate the playback. So if you used a transposing bass clef, Finale would go ahead and play back the notes an octave lower because it knew that was what you wanted. But in Dorico, sometimes I run into a problem where, depending on the manufacturer of the sound sample, my bass will actually play back in the wrong octave. So I wanted to show you a workaround to make sure that your bass is playing in the correct octave. So if you listen to my bass part here, you'll hear that it is literally playing in the low octave as it should. But that is not what's written, right? Because you'll see over here, it's not written as a bass clef transposed down an octave stave. And so for some versions, it actually will play back in the wrong octave. And it kind of drives me crazy. I want it to look right and I want it to sound right. So let me show you a quick workaround in this. So if we go back over to the Setup tab, and then in the Setup tab, if we go down to our player, which is bass guitar here, and I expand it, and if I click on the 3 little dots here next to the bass guitar, you'll see that there is this underneath the window that pops up. You'll see there is a thing here. There's change instrument, there's move instrument to player, but then there's this edit instrument definition. And if you click on the Edit Instrument Definition, it brings up all the different options for this instrument. And you can see there is all of these different options, and these are generated from the player list when we added in players and instruments into our score. And when we're in this menu, you can see we have all sorts of options, like we have string tunings, we have staff labels and names, We have the number of staves, 5 lines, 4 lines. So if you wanted to have, like, for example, a tab staff or something with fewer lines, you can do that in here. You can do bracketing and bracing. You can tell it whether it's a vocal staff. And this one's important because if you want the dynamics to show up above the stave, if you check that box, then dynamics will show up above the stave because that's where they typically are in vocal music. You also have this checkbox here for rhythm section instrument, which does things for your chord symbol display and other things like that. Down here we have our clefs, so you can have your clef for transposing and non-transposing layouts. So for example, a tenor sax, I like to see the clef as a bass clef in concert pitch, but in transposing, obviously it would be a treble clef. So that's where that comes. But then this is the one I like to show off here, is there's this transposition. Now, this is where Dorico allows us to edit it so it'll play back properly even though it's displaying quote-unquote incorrectly, meaning the way it's written should be an octave higher, but we automatically transpose it down. So you can see middle C should be C4. That's where middle C should be. But what I did is I transposed it down to C3. And what that does is it makes it so that anytime it sees a note, it'll play back the note an octave lower. And basically all that's doing is it's doing the same function as the transposing clef of the bass clef down an octave, but it's actually telling the computer what to do. Because when you first put in the bass, it actually looks like this, where it's going to say C4. Whoops, C4. There we go. And you can see it says it's 0 half steps, meaning it's not transposed. And you can hear now, you can see that it actually had to transpose the notes down an octave because that's where they were actually sounding, which is now written incorrectly. And it kind of drives me crazy because if I transpose them up to where they should be written to be a bass guitar, you'll hear that my playback is now in the wrong octave. And again, that just drives me crazy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to transpose that back down, and I'm going to go back over to my setup tab, and I'm going to go down to my bass guitar. I'm going to click on my 3 little dots, edit my instrument definition, and then I'm going to go down to the bottom, and I'm going to change this written middle C to C3, and then I'm going to do the C3 in the other box, which means I transposed everything down an octave automatically. And you'll see it transposed my part again, and when I hit playback, it'll play back in the range I want it to. And you can do that for any of your instruments. So if you're having trouble like viewing an instrument and it keeps coming out weird or something like that, this is a way of literally going in, changing that transposition. So for those of you joining me again, what we're doing is customizing the transposition and other elements of an instrument here in the setup tab, because there are a few instruments where I'm not sure exactly why Dorico does it the way that it does it. But anyway, so moving forward, going along the lines with customizing our setup, I'm noticing my title on my streaming came up wrong. Oh well. So for those of you who are joining us, contrary to the popular belief of my title there, I'm actually customizing a whole bunch of different things in Dorico. But if you do have any questions about things, even about Stream Decks and everything, I am actually using 2 different Stream Decks for this one, which is kind of crazy. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to hit a button on my Stream Deck so you can see my face again. Then I'm going to go under my controller here. And you can see that in my controller app, oh man, this is taking forever this morning. There we go. Should have grabbed my remote control. So if I grab my camera here and I'm just going to tilt it oops, this way, there we go, you can see that I'm actually using two different little stream controllers. I have this little 6-button one, which is pretty darn handy, and what I have this one set up to be is my controller for my streaming platform. So if I go like that and hit that button, it's going to switch me back over to the screen view, and then if I click on this one, it flips me back over to the just my face. And so that's a really handy feature. And it also has some things like I can mute my talking mic, I can start and stop my recording and things like that. But then recently I actually got the bigger brother of that same one. And frankly speaking, had I known it really existed, I'd have bought this one at first. Let me move my camera over just a little bit more here. There we go. And so this one here I think is pretty darn cool. And this one here has 4 knobs, because let me tell you, the thing that I actually use more than the buttons is actually the knobs, because I can cycle through things. In Dorico, so if I hit the screen button here, I have one knob here set to be my zoom command. Oop, I gotta click on Dorico there. There we go. And so see, I can zoom in and out of my score with the turn of a knob. And then I have this one to be my playhead control. So I can actually move my playhead back and forth. So if I want to listen to a section several times, I can click it down to hit play, and then I can rewind and play again, which is really not as easy to do in Dorico as you might think, which is kind of annoying. The other two that I set up is I set up this one here to be the move command. So you can see I'm actually moving the note across my page there. And then this one is actually my lengthen command, so I can make notes longer and shorter. Because those are things I just literally do all the time in Dorico. It also gives me this nice readout, and the cool thing about this readout is it's actually a touch screen, so when I go like this, I can cycle through the different, what they call scenes. And so this one is actually, it's made by the same company, SOOMFON, but it has 10 buttons, 4 knobs, instead of the little one here that you saw me hold up a moment ago. This one is equally as cool. Let me go back to the full screen there so you can see it. So in this one here, you can see I have one big knob, I have 2 little knobs, and then I have these little buttons that do work. They do things. And then I have the 6 programmable buttons. So this one technically has 9 buttons and 3 knobs, but the bigger brother here, this one, like I said, that I really do think is superior. This one here has 10 buttons, and then it has 4 knobs. And like I said, the knobs are way cooler, and then it has this little screen here that is a touch screen. It's not a touch screen as in a tap, but I can swipe left and right to switch scenes. And so you can get a whole lot of mileage out of it. And I really do like it a lot. And so I do have a video out that shows how to customize that for Dorico. And if you have any questions on that, please holler them out there in the chat. But let's get back to what I was doing here, which is I was going to talk a little bit about playback customization. So going back over here into Dorico, one of the things that a lot of people ask me about is playback customization. Let me get my camera repointed here. There we go. I'm actually going to do my little preview here so I can make sure I'm pointing at my face. There we go. Perfect. All right. So one of the things that people ask me about all the time, again, is how to customize the playback in their sound, because there are a couple of things about MIDI instruments that can technically be a little bit irritating depending on the music you're working on. So one of the things I want to show you is one of my favorite ones to customize, which is the drum set. Now, in Dorico, 90% of the time, I use Note Performer for my playback. I think it sounds really good. It's super easy to use, which means I don't have to spend a half an hour setting up my sound set just to hear playback when I'm just notating something. And you can hear the drum set part's okay. But it's kind of boring, frankly. I'm not a huge fan of it, but it certainly does work. The other thing that is a little bit irritating about it is it's kind of quiet for drums. You know, drums are pretty in our face, and the way that we conceive of drums, especially when we're thinking of like recorded music, is the drums are pretty prevalent in the sound. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you how to change up our sound set, and so I can have two different sound sets going on at once. So under our Play tab, this is where we have our mixer, where we can do all of our mixing. Now, those of you who have used Note Performer before know that you can't actually use the mixer, the built-in mixer, when you're using Note Performer. You have to go over and you have to click on this little E here that's under the routing. And what that does is it brings up Note Performer's mixer. Now, I can't tell you that I love or hate this system. It does work just fine. It's just a couple of extra mouse clicks. And so you can see in this mixer, I can see everything but the drum set, because these mixers can only hold 16 instruments at a time, because that's how MIDI was designed. Good grief, so many years ago. And so what'll happen is you'll see if I scroll down to my drum set part, you'll see that it says Note Performer 03. This one here said Note Performer 02. That's because these instruments down on the bottom are actually in the next mixer. So you can see drum set, electric bass, and then you have all these other orchestral percussion instruments that I added. See, there's my conga parts, etc., etc. And so because of that, we have the ability to really customize our sound set. So if we go into any instrument that we want to change, and I'm going to click on this drum set here, you can see that this is the instrument we're going into, this routing, this 03 Note Performer. But what we want to do is we want to add a new instrument. Now, in this screen, you can't add an instrument, but if we go over to this VST and MIDI option, we can go down and we can hit a plus sign here. And when we add, you'll see that it brings up a little box that's empty, and then we can choose the instrument that we're looking for. Oh, there we go. Sorry, let me hit that again. There we go. There's our 04. And then here's all the different companies. I have Garrett, Native Instruments, PG, which comes with Band in a Box. And then here is Steinberg, and that who makes Dorico. And then under their drum, you have this thing called Groove Agent. And I think Groove Agent drums sound really darn good. And they work really well with Dorico because they're obviously made by Steinberg. And so when you click on it, you'll see that it will load that into our system, and it loads up the playback engine for this sound set. And what this visual representation does, it allows us to demo the sounds. So you can see we have a lot of different options there. And then I also have the traditional keyboard down here where I can demo sounds. I also have the pads here. So if you do have a drum pad system on your computer, you can use that as well. So we can also choose different drum kits from this same setup. But for right now, I'm just going to leave it as this one. I have not bought any extra drum kits for this. So for me, I'm just using the basic from Groove Agent SE, which comes with Dorico. And I think it sounds great. So I'm going to go ahead and close that now. And you can see this is now instrument 04. And if I go back to my track inspector and under routing with the drum set part highlighted here, I'm going to go under there and I'm going to go down to my 04. And then what it's going to do is it's going to load in this instrument for this sound set. Then what I need to do is I need to set up my expression map and my percussion map. Now you can see for some instruments, there are specific expression maps. And I'll show you what an expression map is in a minute, and they are very complicated, but they're really important to getting the most out of the playback from your instruments. But in this case, you can see there's not a default one for Groove Agent because drums don't really need a whole lot of expression map stuff because there's not a lot of key triggers or anything that go along with these sound sets. But under Percussion Map, because it is a percussion part, I am going to go in and I'm going to choose my Studio Drum Kit. Because now Dorico knows that when it sees certain symbols on the page, it will do certain things to make it sound correct. And again, what I'm talking about is all of these different little ins and outs of the drum kit. Meaning, if you were to put an X over a symbol, that means it's choked, right? And Dorico knows what to do with that, and it will trigger the correct kind of sound in your drum kit per those markings that you put in your score. And that's what this percussion map does. And you can see if I click on this little thing here, this is the percussion map editor. And you can see what this allows me to do is it had the MIDI note, the note on the keyboard, what the instrument name is, and then the playback technique. And the playback technique basically tells Groove Agent that when I do A0, which is my hi-hat with my foot, that's triggering the pedal sound. But then you can see that F#1 is this hitting the stick on the stand. Here's the stick click, here is hi-hat pedal, and so on and so forth. And that's what these expression maps do. And this is why it's great to use one of these predefined ones, because Dorico already took care of all this stuff for you. If you have an absolute favorite drum sound you want to use, you can create this, but you can see how long this list is. It's really big. And so you can do this, but it will take you a while. And I have done this for other types of instruments. So now that I've done that, again, I went into the VST, I created a new instrument. Under the track inspector, I highlighted the drum set and I chose the Groove Agent, and then I chose the Groove Agent percussion map because that was the one that I was trying to add to my score. And then now when I go back to my right menu, you can hear if I play back, the drum sounds are a lot fuller. Now, I have it set on piano as my dynamic, so it's pretty quiet. But let me just kind of, for a demonstration, let me just set it at fortissimo for a second and just listen to what this sounds like. Let me actually change this one here. So now let me go ahead and play this back. So you can hear it's a much more upfront drum sound. It sounds a whole lot more like a drum set in an actual recording. And then if I go back and I'm just kind of getting rid of all these extra things I added, and if I just click play for the whole thing, so to me, that drum set sound has a little bit more pop. And let me go forward to a spot where it's playing a little more actively, and I think that'll kind of demonstrate this better. And again, with that few mouse clicks, now I was able to maximize the playback because I could get a much tighter sound. Other ones that I like to change out from the standard that comes with Note Performer is things like the electric bass, the electric guitar. Because you can hear my bass sound, again, it's fine. It sounds good for just general daily use. But it's a little dull. So let's go ahead and change that one out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to play, and this time I'm going to click on my bass guitar, and I'm going to go through that same process. But And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go under the VST, and then I'm going to add a new instrument. And in this case, I'm going to go down, and I'm going to go to Steinberg. And I'm just using Steinberg sounds right now, not because there aren't other great ones. Like, for example, I could load up the Contact player, and I have some other sounds that I've purchased. But the Steinberg ones, if you have them, they just work really well. And since I have Halion, it's really nice to be able to just kind of get to these different sounds. I'm going to actually go to Halion 7, which is their kind of professional version. You could use the Halion Sonic, but in this case, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose a single instrument. And then I'm up in my search menu here, I'm going to choose bass. And then it's showing me all the different sample sounds where I can find a bass. And let's see, let's go ahead and I'm going to click on all so I can see them all. And then if I double click on any of these, it'll load it in, and then I can click on the sample. And that's not what I want. So let's see, let's go ahead and choose this filter here for E-bass or electric bass. Not bad. Let's try this one. Not bad. Let's see what the fretless is like. And you can see I have a ton of different bass sounds. And I can just go through here and I can just keep choosing until I get the one I want. Nah. Let's try this studio finger bass. That one's a little boring. Let's try this P-bass one, Finger Studio. Again, that one to me is a little boring. I actually want to go ahead and I'm going to try this one, fret. Actually, I'm going to do the finger bass. Maybe the pick. Yeah, let's try this pick bass. Now again, this is personal preference at this point, right? And I could go through every single one of these and I could find the one that I absolutely love the most. Yeah, that one sounds pretty good. Let's try this one first. So now, one of the things I want to point out is, do you see how on my demo keyboard, do you see how the bottom part of the bass is kind of grayed out and then it's using this top part? Because what it's actually doing is it sort of reassigned the musical keyboard for its different uses. So just by this virtue, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go back over to my track inspector. And I'm going to choose this Halion instrument, which is my bass sound for my bass guitar. And then for my expression map, I'm going to go down and I'm just going to choose the this default one, which is typically fine for a simple instrument like this. And then let's go ahead and go and play back and see what it sounds like. Now, are you noticing something? I am. It's transposed into the wrong octave again. And this is what I was talking about not all instruments play nice. Because again, if we go back to that playback menu and I click on the E there, you can see that it's using a higher piece of the keyboard. Basically, it's using an octave higher than it should if it was playing a literal thing. Now, if I used the general MIDI bass, like this one here, you'll see that when I go back to the play menu, it actually sounds fine. And that's because that other instrument, the designer of the instrument of this, let's see, which one was I using? I think I was using the Finger J bass. Because they're using this higher part of the keyboard, it basically means everything has to be transposed. So when I go back over to Setup, if I go to my bass guitar and I click on my three dots and I edit my instrument, in this case, this instrument actually wants me to not transpose by an octave. So I actually want to set these both to C4 like that. Hit OK. And now you'll see that everything did get transposed down, but if I highlight everything, and I transpose it up an octave, you'll hear that my playback is actually correct. So it depends on your instrument. And this is something that I've found time and time again, that as I go through these different instrument sounds, is once in a while I have to adjust these transpositions, especially for instrument like bass. Logic Pro is a great example of this. If you were to do these kind of things in Logic Pro, their bass sounds are all displaced by an octave. I don't know why they did that. It's kind of a weird sort of thing that they chose to do as software designers. But as a musician, it's a little frustrating because I'm kind of literal. I want it to play where I wrote it. I don't want to have to auto-transpose it. So now let's listen to the whole thing here and just see what we think. So again, you can do this for as many instruments as you want in your Dorico score. So for example, you could change out your piano sound. And like I said, in Note Performer, the ones that I think are the least exciting are sort of the standout instruments, your rhythm section instruments, drum sets, basses, guitars. Because listen to this guitar sound. It's kind of dry, kind of dull. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change it out too. So again, I'm going to highlight the guitar here. I'm going to add in a new instrument. And again, I'm going to add the Halion set. So that's Steinberg, and that's a sampler, Halion. And then I'm going to do a single instrument, and I'm going to do guitar. Oops. Nope, it's not going to work. Let's see. We want a clean electric guitar. That one's, get rid of that one. Let's try pop. No. I'm going to type in actually the word jazz here. And then what I want to do is I want to grab guitar. Oh, no, it's not finding that one. Sometimes these can be a little hard to track down. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change up my search. I'm going to do jazz, and then I'm going to hit all here. And then under this, I'm going to do guitar. Ah, there we go. I think that one sounds pretty good. So now that I've done that, I'm going to go back to my track inspector, and under my guitar, I'm going to choose that other instrument, which was number 7. And then we'll go ahead and go back over to my right, and I'll hit play. And then if I play the whole thing, now, the other nice thing about this is if you are using things other than Note Performer, you'll notice that when I hit playback, now my sliders down here work, and I can assign different EQs and other things to the individual sounds. And see, I can turn my drums up and down. I can get get more or less guitar. So it's just a really nice way of customizing all of those different things in Dorico. And again, I don't do this for every single instrument. I do have upgraded horns and trumpets and saxophones and stuff like that. But on a daily basis, I don't really do that because 9 times out of 10, I'm not actually like submitting this recording for people to listen to. I'm actually just doing this for my own edification. And so this is just a really handy way of upping your game and customizing your Dorico setup just a little bit more so that as you're playing, as you're working, you actually get a little bit stronger playback. Because the thing that I always find is when I'm composing, if I don't get decent playback, I'm not real sure I got exactly what I was hoping for musically, sonically. And so this is a great way of kind of ensuring that you get all of those different sounds in there. So, all right, well, I've been on here for quite a while now, so thanks for everybody who's watching. And again, make sure you go back and check these out. These videos definitely have some great features in there. And as I do more of these live ones, don't hesitate to ask some questions. I know I probably need to do a better job of advertising that I'm going on, but today I just wanted to cover a few of those things, and I thought it would just be a little quicker and a little easier rather than doing a traditional video. But anyway, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch everybody the next time.